I'm Patrick Donegan with TrustTalks. Welcome to another Trust Talks, talking about telecom security with adaptive mobile security. As usual with these sessions, we have broken it down into three segments. The first segment, we will be talking about adaptive mobile security, the company itself. They have some news to share with us. First of all, their attendance at Mobile World Congress. Second, a major new customer announcement. And lastly, an industry award that they've received. Second, our main feature today, we will be talking about how SMS security carries over into the 5G world. Lastly, three hot topics we will be discussing. First of all, hybrid warfare and the use of mobile networks in weaponizing the cybersecurity environment. Second, we will be talking about the role of aggregators in the mobile communications ecosystem and their role in securing or not that ecosystem. Lastly, we will be talking about the role of government in critical telecom infrastructure, the role that regulations and government mandates may increasingly play in securing the mobile network environments that we all love and enjoy on a daily basis. So to our first segment, a bit of adaptive mobile security news. With me, joining me any second now, I hope, is Brian Collins. Brian is, of course, Senior Vice President with Adaptive Mobile Security. Good morning, Brian. How are you doing?
Patrick, how's it going? Good to speak to you again.
You too. What news do you have to share with us this time?
Yes, what incredible excitement we have here. A number of aspects related to the company. Patrick, we were delighted to win the security category in the recent Fierce Wireless Awards. I mean, it's an endorsement of what we do. And we're always grateful to be recognized by our peers in the industry. We don't get carried away with any of these, but it gives us an indication where we're pointing in the right direction. Second, obviously, end of February, early March, traditionally MWC shows up on the horizon, and we look forward together with our group company, Enea, to darken the doors of Barcelona. And listen, we're optimistic that it will be a good showing. It's been a couple of years since it's been in proper place, and we look forward to seeing our customers and our colleagues there. Within the confines of the show, we've been selected for the best security solution on the Glomo side. So we'll see how we go there. Once again, we don't want to be defined by awards as a company, but it's a clear indication and possible endorsement, further endorsement of what we do. And I suppose most importantly to me is the person who heads up the security unit within Enea is a big customer win, which we're announcing on this medium, which Digicel has selected Adaptive Mobile Security to protect all their subscribers in their 27 markets in the Caribbean. So on the signaling side, we're delighted with this opportunity. It's a clear clarification that Digicel are going to differentiate themselves in making their networks the most secure in the region. And we're very close to going live, and we look forward to providing the insight and the relevant intelligence to Digicel to show them that they are the leaders in those markets. So it adds another 27 countries to our footprint. So that's what's up to date with adaptive mobile security.
Terrific stuff, and a nice place to go and visit customers from time to time, Brian.
Yeah, absolutely. I have had to embargo some people who want to go to Barbados, particularly around Christmas time. But listen, I'm sure we will all manage a trip out there in due course.
Terrific. All right, so to the second segment, the topic of the day. I'm going to be talking now with Cathal Mc Daid, who should be popping up any minute. There he is. Hi, Cathal. How are you?
Hello, Patrick. How are you doing?
Very well indeed. Nice to see you. Cathal, as you may know from previous Trust Talks or other encounters in the industry, is the CTO of Adaptive Mobile Security, and Cathal and team have been doing a lot of very interesting research into SMS in 5G. How does SMS carry over into 5G, and how, most importantly, does the security profile of SMS carry over into 5G? So, Cathal, let us know in the first instance, how is SMS being carried over in 5G? I guess before we talk too much about security, what does that look like?
Hi, Patrick. Yes, even before getting into security, I think a lot of people are quite surprised with the idea at all that SMS is in 5G. I mean, in their minds, most people's minds, 5G is this very new, bold leap forward when it comes to technology. So why are we still having a technology that's been there for the last 20 years? So basically, SMS is still in there. It's still in the 5G specifications because it's very, very standard. Everybody is very, very used to it. And there is, I mean, when you look at it, mobile operators are not going to switch off a technology which is in widespread use by every single mobile user around the world.
Right.
It's still the simplest way to communicate. It's still used, and especially what we've seen a lot over the COVID period of time, it's used especially now, not so much for maybe people-to-people messaging, but from what we call application to people, A2P type messaging. So
yeah,
we've all during COVID received possibly text messages telling us there's going to be delivery at our house, or there'll be delivery or notifications about COVID results and so on. And this is where SMS is really one of the ultimate communication mechanisms, because every single mobile phone supports it. There's no issue with apps or any other type of barrier. It is really, really simple and plain, and that's why it's staying in the 5G standards.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that the operators themselves don't make that much money out of it, but a lot of other folks do, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a huge ecosystem which is built up around the SMS environment, if you can put it that way. Even you can see there's a lot of companies. There's been a lot of movement in the space in America, North America, and Europe about different companies which have done really well out of SMS, sending SMS on behalf of small companies and getting those small companies involved and giving them access to sending text messages. So there was no way when it came to SMS that this was going to move. Now, SMS in 5G is a little bit different. There's actually two different ways of doing it. It's one, they've kept the old system. They've simply copied and pasted, if I could use that word, into the 5G standards. Also, they've put in a different way of doing it as well, that they've sent it using the IP channels. But the end result of a simple message that we send to your handset essentially remains the same. And of course, as well as that, I mean, our paper does cover a little bit as well that there's other technology, RCS, which has been around for quite a while as well. People mightn't realize that it has always been seen as something for the future. It's never quite replaced SMS, but it's still an option that people and companies can use in the 5G standards going forward.
So, as you say, you guys have written a paper. Are we providing a link to this at the end of this session?
Absolutely will be, yes. I mean,
okay.
And the good thing about the paper, if to jump forward into it, essentially on the security side, is that we are really one of the first people to look at what are the security implications when it comes to SMS in the 5G ecosystem.
So, at a high level, 50,000 feet, what are those core findings?
Just like I said, there's been something of a copy and pasting of the SMS functionality into 5G. We are essentially seeing that all the issues that we see today when it comes to SMS security are also present in the 5G world.
Right.
So if people were expecting that they're not going to receive any more spam text messages, that isn't going to happen because the 5G standards have simply copied and pasted the same mechanism in here. And this is interesting, I think, from our perspective, in that when people think of possibly cyber attacks or telecom attacks, they're thinking possibly of exotic types of attacks. But the two attacks that most people have encountered involving mobile networks are spam text messages and robocalls. And spam text messages in particular, these are essentially going to be the same type of situation. There's no change in the standards to try to make them harder or not. And that's understandable because those are actually really, really hard to defend against. These are humans on the other side trying to launch these phishing attacks using text messages or spam attacks. And it's not just a situation of somebody specifying in the new 5G standard, these attacks won't happen. It takes a lot more work than that to actually stop and prevent these.
Right. So from a spam and robocall perspective, it sounds like regrettably, miserably, it's going to be business as usual as we get into 5G. Are there sort of new, unique types of threats that we'll see as a result of SMS running over a 5G network that we haven't seen in the 4G world?
It's very likely. And the reason we can't say for definitive is because we don't really have real 5G networks interconnecting out there yet in the right. world. But when we've done our research and when we've looked at this and what's covered in our paper is that it's possible that because in the 5G world you have this idea of certainly the networks are much more complex, and you got this concept of slicing and giving access and so on. Yeah. That if you were to give access inside the 5G network, then it's possible that these if this access was compromised and somebody did something that they shouldn't have done, then they could start to execute types of attacks. They could try to possibly intercept SMS within the network. And so in theory, if this is something that operators go down the road of, given this sort of slicing type of access to the innards of their mobile networks, then you could potentially have new types of attacks. The fact is that 5G networks are more complex, and it's my belief that anytime you add complexity to a system, you never invariably increase the possibility of something going wrong or some sort of hole being left open. And so when you make something more complex, then there's bigger possibility that attackers will find a hole and try to use it.
Mm-hmm. So there's a risk of different threat vectors, but we just can't really predict what they are at the minute.
Yeah, but we can make some good and accurate assumptions. Like, for example, I mentioned 2 or 3 times is that they've simply copied and pasted some of the older SMS functionality. And I literally mean that in 5G networks, there is actually going to be a component in there which essentially interfaces into 3G and 4G networks. So when you do SMS over 5G, if you try to send a text message to an operator in another country, it's not actually going to go over 5G, it's going to go over 3G or 4G. They've kept a lot of the same technology and paths.
Right.
So we can still say that, okay, we know those attacks exist on those bearers 3G and 4G, so we can expect the same thing, the sort of hybrid or combined type of network. So, and this shows as well is that, again, the 5G network isn't just going to spring out of nowhere. It's going to be built on what's there at the moment. And operators have to work with what's there at the moment. They can't just simply afford to throw away billions of dollars of mobile infrastructure. They need to interact with it. And as a result, then your threat landscape includes not only what you see on 5G, but also you need to be aware of what we currently see in 4G and 3G, which is attacks over SMS.
Right. I imagine in terms of your guidance for operators, it has to be, if you have the appropriate levels of SMS protection in place already, don't throw them away. If you don't have those in place, invest in them now. Is there anything else above and beyond? Is there anything new from a protection point of view that you would counsel operators to be looking at seriously?
Yes, I mean, from our perspective, 5G is such a huge investment, such a huge area. And I can understand from those deploying it, it seems like this overwhelming list of areas they need to look at and threats they need to investigate. My main recommendation would be obviously to read our paper, because it's the first paper of this type and it's really detailed analysis of this. But also, what I've been saying is plan in security from the start, because what we found in other systems is if you try to do this afterwards, it always, to be frank, costs you more money and it's harder to do when you try to do it at a later point and try to do it at the start. So I would say, listen, don't dismiss. You might think SMS is old technology and you, like you said there, don't throw away your old protection. Absolutely don't, but also look to see how your old protection works with your new 5G network. If you got them in 2 silos, if they're not communicating with each other, you're going to miss out on understanding what the threats are, and possibly you might miss out on seeing an attack which is trying to, get from one side to another side. So don't just look at everything in isolation. Look at it from the start and look at it together, and don't wait until the end when you got a 5G standalone network, nearly rolled out. Then consider, okay, we got SMS, I need to support it. That's not just a tick the box. That's something you need to look at to see what is there and what an attacker could misuse to try to get into your network, or to actually potentially attack your subscribers. Because like I said, the vast majority of people today, if they're being attacked through mobile networks, they're either getting spam text messages or phishing text messages, and they're losing money on this, or robocalls. And these are both old traditional, people might call them traditional types of attacks, but they affect people globally every day.
Right. And I can attest, by the way, I have read the paper. It is extremely long, it is extremely detailed, and there is absolutely nothing like it on the market. So for mobile security folks looking for that type of guidance, it is a unique document, and I would highly recommend it from that point of view. Lastly, I guess really let's wrap up in terms of what do you think of as the lifespan of SMS? I mean, it's been with us for 30 years. We didn't know what to do with it for the first, 4 or 5. It was there, but we didn't know what to do with it. How much longer does it carry on? Does it have a lifetime of another 10, 20 years? What do you think?
Well, I remember personally being myself in a meeting about 10 years ago. We're discussing SMS security, and there was a comment that if SMS is still around in 10 years, we should all retire. So I'm not going to make that prediction for the next 10 years. I believe it will be around at least for the next 10, 20 years. And the reason that is like I said, it's because it's a base layer that every phone uses, but also there's a lot of use cases which people didn't anticipate at the start when they invented this technology, which has now been used. For example, like IoT devices in the 5G ecosystem, IoT devices will also use SMS. And
right.
It's a great form of communication for them because sometimes, it doesn't need to necessarily use bandwidth and so on, and, lower power consumption. So it's going to stay around for a while. And I'll give you an example of how things tend to persist. MMS, I've seen it, is still supported in new 5G handsets which are coming to the market, even though the actual MMS standards haven't been updated for 10 years. And MMS
is that right?
doesn't actually have a place in 5G world, but its handsets are going to still support it because I expect that operators will also support it for quite a period of time. So things persist in technology, especially mobile operators, much longer than you would anticipate them. So we are going to be seeing SMS for quite a while, good or bad.
Great stuff, Cathal. Let's come back in a second. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick.
All right, so to our third and final segment on what else is going on out there. We are, regrettably, I suppose, going to be talking about hybrid warfare. We're going to be talking about the role of aggregators in securing communications. We're going to be talking about the role of government in securing critical telecom infrastructure. And for this segment, I'm joined by both Cathal and Brian, who are back with us to discuss all these things. So the first subject is the rather unnerving subject of hybrid warfare. Let's talk a little bit, first of all, with Cathal about how you're defining hybrid warfare, how mobile networks can be weaponized towards the ends of nation states, and some evidence, I think, of how you've actually seen one very specific group engaged in this type of activity. So let's start with the all-important definitional aspects, Cathal, because as we know, the word warfare and cyber can be grossly used and misused and abused, notably in the media. How are you defining hybrid warfare in the context of the mobile network environment, Cathal?
Thanks, Patrick. Yes, and you are correct. It's important to get these terms right from the start. So basically, what we're defining is hybrid war or hybrid warfare. It's a situation where a country combines essentially overt military force with other means of power. And these other means of power could be broken down to types like diplomatic, military, economic, and technological. And a hybrid threat is also something we cover, is something that combines anything from these four dimensions. So obviously the other forms or types would be the technological, and that's where cyber attacks or this is the area that this would fit into. So in our specific area, and what we've done our research in is basically how cyber attacks could be essentially enabled by for use of phrase, weaponization of mobile telecom networks. And the reason you would do that is that you would try to then achieve objectives within the battle space for offensive military measures. And the end result of this would be categorized as essentially a force multiplier. So essentially is that you'll be using mobile telecom networks in the pursuit of the goals that you set in the environment.
Mm-hmm. And can you give us some examples of the type of thing that we could be looking at here?
Yes. So from our research, the types of things that you could do is essentially you could do what we term like essentially over the horizon type tracking. So in the within the whole battle space at the moment, the typical types of electronic warfare is that you have a tracking, but that's generally tends to be on the front lines. But if you were to combine this with mobile networks, you have a situation where we call over the horizon. You could have tracking of personnel, either military personnel in the areas to help achieve any objectives that an offensive force might have. Another one might be denial of service, on not only military but also civilian decision makers, politicians, and so on. So any type of denial of service type, large-scale denial of service type attack on civilian decision makers within the environment could then have a beneficial effect for the attackers, because then they could essentially use this confusion or could use this lack of communication then to improve the results of any type of offensive that they could actually have. So it's any sort of combination of attacks that we see over mobile networks to help the hybrid warfare environment. And this isn't typically what we see at the moment in the general environment. What we see at the moment is attacks on mobile networks tend to be much more stealthy, surveillance. But what we're in our research, what we're looking at to see is if those breaks were taken away, what could be achieved by using mobile telecom networks in that whole environment.
So we've been talking kind of theoretically here, but from talking with you previously, it sounds like you've actually got evidence, you've actually identified a very particular group that's actually doing this right now. Yes,
so we've done, as you know, and hopefully a lot of viewers know, we've done a huge amount of research in the threat actors that we see in the mobile telecom space. There has been, we've obviously spoken in the past before about, sometimes criminal gangs. We've seen intercept text messages for fraud reasons, surveillance companies, which we've seen offer surveillance as a service. But actually what we've been researching and following is basically a particular signaling threat actor, which we call a platform, which our intelligence has attributed to likely have Russian direction and control. And so what we're looking at is we've categorized their activity in the past. We're also looking at their activity at the moment in that they've gone into a type of a, what they perform is occasional reconnaissance, making sure that they still have capability in place. They normally have large bursts of activity, and they can go very, very quiet for a large period of time. And our research and our understanding, our intelligence leads us to believe that, like I said, that this is a threat actor which is likely to be used in any type of potential situation.
And does this threat group have a name? And if so, do you want to share it with us, or do you want to keep it to yourself for now?
No, I mean, it's like I said, the name we've given to this is Hidden Art.
Right.
There's reasons behind that. When we've observed it, it tries to do a unique type of camouflage, if you use that way. Us, like many other cybersecurity companies, we normally give names to threat actors once we observe them for a while. It's much easier to remember 1001. So that's the name we've given it because it does do a form of obfuscation of actually where it came from and actually how it's used. But like I said, we've done a lot of research over we've been following this threat actor for many years, and we're quite confident of its origin and of its usage. So this is the name we've given it, and like I said, we've covered this in our research, and this is the type of activity that we've potentially associated. And the research that we've done is basically covering to see how an actor like this something like this could potentially be used to help or enhance any type of activity which might be done in this area.
We're going to go to the second item here, the role of aggregators in securing communications. Now, we've seen in recent months, for example, an IPX carrier like Cineverse announcing that it suffered a very, very substantial breach. We've seen an outfit like Mitto that has been running for many years a legitimate bulk messaging service out of Switzerland, actually coming up in the press for having been selling not so legitimate services to governments to carry out overt and covert spying operations that really they probably should not have been doing. I think, Brian, from a security perspective, we can all agree that you're only as strong as your weakest link. In the mobile sector, is it the case that in many cases our aggregators are our weakest link?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a very salient point that you bring up. They've finally been exposed. This has been an area that we have continually focused on for the last number of years. That a carrier hands its traffic off to an aggregator, an IPX or a GRX carrier, and the level of trust that they have the same level of security as the carrier who checks. Because this concept of trust, as we've always said, trust is not a security strategy. It's not a national security strategy. It's not a personal security strategy. Who can you trust? And really, Patrick, there is no surprise with these exposures that have gone on. I think everyone was shocked that Cineverse came out with their hands up with regard to a hack on their network, which went on for a duration of 5 years.
Right.
And it was compounded when they stated that the hacker appeared not to be financially focused, which immediately points it to a nation state.
Yeah.
So, having been involved in security business and telecoms for 30, 35 years, that would suggest to me these guys got everything. And that is, as you know, Cineverse, provide a vast number of services, both externally and internally to the US. So someone has got a truckload of data. The Meta one is probably a bit more sinister.
Meta, yeah.
Yeah, a company with a Swiss incorporation, but we believe operated more out of Serbia. There had been many rumors going on. It looks like the data allegedly puts them in a position they were selling that data, or an individual within the company, because there seemed to be whistleblowing ongoing, was selling data to a Middle Eastern security agency. And I see Google have been drawn into the mess as well, Patrick, insofar as they were using Mito as one of their key partners regarding authentication for Gmail accounts. But to be honest, there's no surprise. I mean, aggregators are a key and a very weak link in the telecom transit supply chain, and they are being exposed for that.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, a key message being, it's all very well worrying about the security of network infrastructure providers, all very well worrying about the security of the chips that go into those network infrastructure providers. But if the folks on the back end, on the aggregation layer, are getting in at that end, that's we're none the wiser, none the safer. And
there's so, as you say, there's so many threat vectors, be it the phone, be it the network, be it the aggregator, be it the chipset, be it, but it just goes to show how great a focus for national security agencies, for criminals, for fraudsters, that telecom data is, because your phone is in most cases linked to your bank. It portrays so much detail about you, that all the investment, and we've obviously NSO have received enough prominence in the news. I'm not going to speak about them this time, but it just goes to show that the mobile phone is the #1 target for malicious actors.
Let's though recognize the dilemma that the industry faces, in the sense that we know very well that hundreds upon hundreds of bilateral relationships between telcos is enormously costly. We know that these aggregators introduce tremendous efficiencies and cost savings into the industry, and that the industry has benefited from that and benefits from that today. So, these aggregators do serve a very important economic function in the ecosystem as we know it today, don't they?
So they certainly have their part to play. I mean, Cathal will give you some indication, is obviously under 5G, there will be a lot more direct connects, but that's still a number of years away. Patrick, absolutely, they have a key function, but they should not extract themselves or make them, believe they have a special case for lacking security. They carry people's data. They carry key details with regard to people, and as you see, they are now becoming a kind of a #1 target for those who want to, for a vast number of different malicious actors, be they state or be they criminals.
So, Brian, how do we have our cake and eat it? How do we get the benefits of these guys, the economic efficiency of these guys, whilst upping the level of security that's associated with them? What's the
I mean, it's a fair question. We deal with one very large company, large country, whose view is that they will now put the onus on the aggregators to ensure traffic entering the country is devoid and is clear of malicious actors. So they will, as opposed to put the initial primary onus on the carriers, they will put the initial requisite on the regulation on the aggregators introducing traffic into that country, much like 9/11, when the United States put the onus on the airline carriers to ensure anyone they brought into the US had the proper visa, and they fined them or banned them if they didn't concur. So I think you will see in the next 6 to 9 months that whatever about regulation, it's the capability to enforce. We can talk. I mean, so many regulators around the world like to talk, but the model with regard to regulation or telecom regulation is hopelessly broken, Patrick, by virtue of the fact they're dependent on the carriers to subvent the operation of the office. So in a lot of countries, they're very they're afraid to poke the bear as such, because they're reliant on. So I think you will see that governments, certainly governments who value the protection of their telecommunication infrastructure, will begin to move to put more pressure on aggregators, be they IPX, GUX type, to ensure that they are part of the security supply chain.
Well, that's a very nice segue into our next segment, which is expanding on that whole area that you've just touched on, the broader area of government involvement in securing telecom infrastructure. So we've seen evidence in recent months of governments actually being quite effective in cracking down on ransomware governments in the US. We've seen that in Europe, taking action as well to not just arrest the gangs, but to prevent or restrict the use of crypto exchanges in support of ransomware. That's all been good. We've seen governments in Ireland, Belgium, Australia amending their legislation to either enable or even mandate telcos to do a better job with respect to filtering SMS messages. All good stuff. We've seen the UK, the Telecom Security Bill, creating new powers to mandate new security requirements on telcos in the UK. It does, to your point, look as though government are finally, going through the gears, as it were, ratcheting up the pressure, taking more action. I guess the question is, are they doing enough now? Are they going in the right direction, Brian?
So first, Patrick, I applaud your research in this area. Yeah, if you look back at the history of, particularly in the mobile, fixed line was slightly different. In the 80s and 90s, you would have seen a lot of the big government-owned telcos be privatized, or go on public markets. The tradition with mobile licenses is that they were, in most cases, offered to the highest bidder. Now, how great a focus do carriers in Belgium, France, Ireland for that matter, or the United States, Mexico, how much of a focus is to protect the national critical infrastructure of the country? They're there to make profits, and in a lot of cases, they're being threatened by nation state security actors. So, at a base level, you would believe that they are entitled to nation state support with regard to protecting them against that. But it's the traditional quandary which you've identified, which is how these mobile carriers who have vast amount of data, who are operating on a profit basis, as indeed they should be. No one's blaming them for that. Is how responsible are they for the national security of a particular country in which they operate? And the other point is regulators. There's a great expression about, after all is said and done, there's always much more said than there is ever done. And that applies to regulators. And, do they have the tools to enforce? They have certainly legislation to regulate. And some are very good. Some are very good, but the majority of them are not good. And that is the quandary which I outlined previously, is they're dependent on subvention from the mobile carriers and indeed all telco carriers. So it's, once again, the balance between regulation and enforcement here. And I think you are going to see governments realize that, mobile carriers probably need some support. We're not, at AdaptiveMobile Security and this individual, we're not advocating for police states here. We're not. But data is, you've heard the line before, data is the new gold. That's why everyone is trying to acquire it, be it Google, Facebook, some nation state agency, criminals, they wanted to steal your identity. And your mobile phone is the quickest route to that. From that aspect, we believe, and certainly I speak to governments, I speak to regulators on a regular basis, they accept that there's a gap in the security. What we've just discussed with regard to the aggregators being exposed is just the first step. So yeah, I strongly believe that there will be a significant advancement of different strategies to protect countries.
Let's talk a little bit about the ultra reliable low latency communications, URLLC in 5G. Now that's a very particular area. It's on the way. It's not rolling out yet, but the intent is that we're at a time when cyber threats are posing an increasing threat to critical infrastructure. We've seen water facilities, energy companies, hospitals, schools brought down, and real havoc created for them, food supply. in the case, just in the course of the last year. Just at this point in mobile land, we are inviting these critical sectors of industry to expose themselves to, yes, all the marvels of the 5G hyperconnectivity, but yes, all the risk as well. So I guess, you know, on a scale of 1 to 10, where do you think governments on the whole are in terms of having an understanding of what the security requirements are for those URLLC use cases? Not just governments in terms of the telecom sector, but the individual regulators of the water industry, the power industry, the transport industry. Where are they in terms of understanding what the security requirements are going to be if they're going to let the participants in their sector connect to 5G in the way that URLLC expects?
Yeah, once again, a very relevant question. I'm no expert on URLC, and I mean, obviously, one of the greatest selling points of 5G is, you know, the low latency. It's absolutely inherent upon us all, Patrick, yourself, Cathal, all our team, and everyone in telecoms, to make sure that the mistakes of 4G are not repeated in 5G. And I think you could argue that we're beginning to see, you know, private ambitions are begin to exert themselves at the standards bodies to suit certain players in the space. The governments have become more alive, I would have to say, and of course, in democracies, they change on a regular basis, and different focus, you know, different priorities come into play. Obviously, we saw them unite to a certain degree with regard to the Chinese technology question, which still rumbles on today. In 5G, obviously the big issue is one of the key tenets of business plans is for carriers to retrieve their investment in 5G is the whole area of slicing. You know, how secure is that going to be? Is the carrier going to guarantee that while you're using a slice in their network, you will have full security coverage, or is that going to be left to the people who are actually taking the paying for the slice from the carrier? So there's areas like that. The other area, which of course hasn't been touched on, is encryption, and that probably deserves an entire program. But I think we are coming to a key decision point with regards to some of the we speak to a number of carriers. What is interesting, I'm sure Cathal will confirm, and some of our other team, is they all seem to have a different view of what 5G is going to bring, and you know, that's good because that drives innovation. But if you're spending a couple of billion on spectrum and infrastructure equipment, you want to be pretty sure it's going to make a change and people are willing to pay for it. And I think we're only now beginning to see 5G cores be deployed.
Last question. Presumably your guidance to the operators with respect to regulation and government involvement is, don't just sit back and let it happen. Get in front of the curve, understand it better than they do, feed them what you understand and know in order that you're ahead of the curve and making sure that they do a good job.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I would recommend that. I mean, they have to protect the privacy of their subscribers as well. But yeah, I mean, the government have to share some of the financial burden of protecting the national critical infrastructure of a country. It shouldn't be all at the door of the mobile operators. So, you know, there is significant resource now being applied to extract data from countries to ignore the privacy of subscribers, and that requires a government response. So yes, I would encourage mobile carriers within their own remit, you know, to embrace any assistance they can get from governments to help protect them.
Very good. Thanks, Brian. That concludes another edition of Trust Talks. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you very much indeed, Brian and Cathal, for participating.
Thanks, Patrick. Good to speak to you again.
I will see you both again next time. And in the meantime, you should any minute now on your screen see a link to the new Securing SMS in 5G white paper that Cathal talked about earlier on. That's it from me. Thank you for joining us and hope to see you next time.